Action Yoga, exposing the conditioned personality. Dream Action Yoga, exposing the conditioned personality. I am first going to reveal where that tagline, exposing the conditioned personality, comes from, and then go into something very specific about yoga and the practice of it. And in my other podcasts, once I transfer this over there, it's probably going to be part of this. I guess it's a demystification series because I did one about demystifying hypnosis and witchcraft. So this will be demystifying yoga. And so, as I mentioned, this exposing the conditioned personality is not original to me. A book that I acquired back in 2004 was called The Heart of Yoga by TKV Jessica Char. And I'm not certain where in the book I saw that particular line. But out of the entire book, it stuck out to me as resonating with exactly what I attempt to do with many things, to expose the conditioning. Now, this sometimes may sound like it's implying that when something is exposed, that's because it is not a good thing, it's bad, it's being naughty, and it must be disciplined or changed. No, that's not it. Sometimes we expose things simply to examine them, to apply analysis to it, so that we can basically go from that state where we are in sometimes that could be a subconscious competence and move it into a conscious competence to examine it and perhaps build on it some more. Now, because I just said that about the subconscious and conscious competence, it is beneficial for me to go over those four levels and also to assert that this hierarchy is what I truly mean and would like to usually communicate when I talk about this. And it's that at the highest level, which I consider to be subconscious competence, meaning it's your second nature or it's your procedural memory. You don't need to, that's what neurologists call it, they call it procedural memory. The second nature that you don't need to think about it. I specifically use the word subconscious, whereas when I learned it and how most people use it, the word unconscious is still attached to that. However, I think that the term unconscious should be relegated to the bottom rung of the ladder where you don't know that you are messing up or don't know, right? So that very base of this hierarchy, this ladder that you climb, would be unconscious incompetence, right? So there's a difference. There's a difference in the ladder here, right? So this is what I mean. So if you follow with me here, before we go into this exposing the conditioned personality, my free association here. So you may start off with unconscious incompetence. You don't know how bad you're doing, right? And then it moves to conscious incompetence, where now you know what you have to work on. Then it moves to conscious competence, where now you're aware that you're doing things well. But then instead of saying that it moves into unconscious competence, I'd say it moves to subconscious competence. It's a distinction between the unconscious and the subconscious, right? Unconscious means without consciousness, whereas subconscious means just below. That's where most of our behaviors are stored, in that subconscious facility. So, welcome, hey, Davina and Stephanie. So the subconscious. So that took me on a little side note there. Why I thought about that was because as I was talking about this second part of this title here, which is the name of my, if you will allow me to say, my brand of yoga is called Dream Action Yoga, which, if you didn't notice, it's an acronym DAY, so D. And there's so many reasons for that, with me being a lucid dreamer and a daydreamer, and also understanding that action is the real magic of our existence. But you, the tagline, exposing the conditioned personality, I want to continue to be aware that because something is being exposed, it's not necessarily meaning it in a way that that which is being exposed is naughty or bad or something that needs to be changed, right? It's just that, as I mentioned in the fact that we often get to a subconscious competence, that exposing that conditioning of our personality, sometimes it's good to bring it back to conscious competence so that we can examine it and either just assess and see how we're doing, apply some analysis to do it, and perhaps there is some room for improvement. It's one of the first things that my mother taught me, amongst many, but that was one of the things was, everything happens for a reason. There's always room for improvement. Do what you love and the money will follow. And my favorite one was a question, which was, what do you mean can't? And so sometimes the things we expose are not bad. However, when we become conditioned to exposing our conditioning, it allows us to determine whether or not the things that we are conditioned to doing, those things that are either subconscious or unconscious behaviors, when we bring them to our consciousness, when we expose them, as in exposing film to light, which is a good metaphor because you've heard before that when someone doesn't know something, they may be in the dark, and when it is revealed to them, it is the issue has been brought to light. These are great metaphors if you really think about how they actually apply in a practical and pragmatic way. So none of these things yet touch on a very important reason for me displaying this and presenting this here. And it really is this idea of demystifying yoga. Because what has happened to yoga is that it has become, which is not what I'm about to say is not necessarily for everyone a negative verdict upon what I perceive yoga as becoming. It's just that this is what it is, and the results that happens because of it. So yoga has become very commoditized and commercialized, which has very many benefits, but also some of the problems are that people often feel left out of being able to practice yoga, which they've been told may have many benefits for their mind, body, and spirit, because it seems there are many barriers to entry. It seems excessively and unnecessarily, superfluously complicated. And that's because when many people look at yoga, they see all of these complicated looking poses, and then people are speaking Sanskrit. You know, they're saying things like Namaste and all the different names for the poses in a different language. Comes from India, right? And this is, and then you hear all of these different things about how long you're supposed to do this many breaths and this many seconds and all of this other things, right? And it becomes ornamental, it becomes very decorated to the point where it can be for some overwhelming. And so this exposing the condition of personality has many meanings because we're exposing one that first yoga does not have to be all of these complicated manifestations that seem to be barriers. You can practice, and here's the simplest way. Let's get this out of the way so that you can have something right now to take away with you to understand a practice of yoga that is for most people easily applied in their life right now. So my most dedicated, consistent practice of yoga, and here's one of those complicated words, and I'm going to tell you in a different language. This is what it's called. My most dedicated practice of yoga is what would be known as pranayama. And all that simply means is breathing. That's it. Pranayama yoga is a breathing yoga. It's the breath part of the yoga practice. So you can have asanas, right? There's another one of those words which are just poses. And then you have this kundalini, there's another one of those words, right? All this other stuff. However, when I was speaking of the simple things a few days ago that make up what might seem on the surface to be a complicated routine that I carry out throughout my day, I spoke about one of the very first thing I do when I get up in the morning, and that's before I do anything else. I make a point to lie down, usually on my back, and I usually wake up in the late morning or early afternoon, so I make sure I cover my eyes if they're dark, and I simply just focus on taking in 10 long, deep breaths. So, if you are already doing any type of breathing exercise in which you take some time out to specifically focus on breathing in and out, any number of times, including one, if you specifically take the time to do just that, guess what? You're practicing yoga, pranayama yoga, a breathing yoga. Now I can hear some yoga teachers and some supposed yoga masters in the back of my head screaming, now, you can't say that. This is not, no, this, no, you must have a guru and a teacher and they must tell you the proper tech. No, that's not, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that to people. That's not how it goes. But the tradition, I did stop. Just because somebody told you that, who was told by somebody who told them that, who was told by somebody who told them that, that doesn't fly. That's not how this works. That's not fundamental. That's not fundamentally true. It's not okay to put up barriers and hoops for people to jump through so that they can have a practice that's going to be beneficial for their lives and keep them out of your club and say that they're not practicing yoga when the essence of it is simply that. When you decide in your mind that you're going to take a moment or a few moments or several moments to take in one to as many long, deep breaths as you want to, and you know that that's what you're doing, you've intentionally done that, you are practicing yoga. And if we want to get fancy with the words, once again, it's pranayama yoga. And it doesn't have to be, you can be distracted like a gnat. You could be fidgety like a rat or a squirrel or a jumpy little nippity dog. Your mind could be racing all over the place. But the fact that you are at least able to keep yourself in one place or the other and practicing taking in a deep breath because you know that your body feels good when you do it, practicing yoga. There, I've demystified yoga. Now, here's something that may be exciting. That all you have to do is start there. When you wake up in the morning or at any point in time when you stop, when you feel stressed out, just do that. Just decide, say, hey, I'm gonna breathe in really deeply, more deeply than I have maybe throughout the whole day. Or if it's the first thing you're doing in the morning, say, I'm gonna do this so I get this out of the way. You can, if you like, add stuff to that. That then becomes more of a practice that is building upon itself with other things. It's not necessary, but you can. I do it. I've been teaching yoga since 2004. It's 20 years. And as I was talking about before, the commoditization of yoga with the certifications and the wonderful yoga alliance and all of the 300-hour and all this types of training, yoga teacher training, all this stuff like that is missing the point. Now, I'm not saying that if you're going to be teaching physical yoga classes with people that you shouldn't know a thing or two about how to move people through poses safely and carefully and know a little bit about this anatomy and those different things so that you don't hurt somebody and hurt yourself. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm demystifying yoga. I'm saying what it is for a personal practice. As a matter of fact, the book where I got this tagline, Exposing the Conditioned Personality, from, the book, if you didn't hear before, is called The Heart of Yoga by TKV Desikachar. As a matter of fact, that book was about developing your own personal practice. And so when I share Dream Action Yoga, Exposing the Conditioned Personality, that is my brand. That is my personal practice that I'm sharing with other people. And therein lies another clue to the simplicity, the true simplicity and fundamental of yoga, and of pretty much all in any teaching, unless people are following a recipe. And it's this. It's that when we are teaching or sharing with others, it may be best shared and taught as we practice ourselves. We're sharing our own personal practice. And this is one of the reasons why not everyone vibes with every person who shares something or everyone who teaches something. Because you might not be vibing with their personal practice. It just doesn't work for you. That's it. It might be a clash of personality. Now, one thing that I can brag about a little bit is that when I started teaching yoga, that many people were saying over and over again that I was the best yoga teacher they ever had. And there are some interesting reasons for that. And it's because of the simplicity of my personal practice. But I'd like to also touch on this personal practice idea again and the clash of personalities, and something that I learned when I went to the Hypnosis Motivation Institute to train and get my degree in clinical hypnosis. And it was something that I learned that goes something like this: that 25% of the people we encounter are automatically going to be highly suggestible to you. Put it this another way, that they will be people who are easily hypnotized by you. Put another way, these are the people that are your tribe, the people that will automatically feel in resonance with you. And when you share your personal practice with them, it will feel good to them, because that is the nature of our social existence, that at least a quarter of the people you encounter are automatically going to, basically, they're going to like you. And they'll follow things that you do if you have some expertise or you're sharing something that they want to learn from. Now, how interesting is that? Isn't that wonderful? That 25% of the people will automatically be vibing with you. And so that is a little hint about why folks may or may not, why you may or may not like the teaching style or the practice of some particular teacher of yoga or martial arts or anything. And to extend on that, to expand on this, that is, in this same, on this same idea, one of the reasons why many people have gravitated towards my teaching style, and as Shireen, who was the group fitness manager at one of the places I taught, said, that I'm very well received. She said of me that I'm very well received in all the classes that I teach. And the reason is because I followed this idea of exposing the conditioned personality, and the idea of the entire book, The Heart of Yoga, that said to develop your personal practice. And not only did I develop my personal practice, but that's what I shared. Whereas I'm, I didn't do a scientific study on this, but whereas I observed that many teachers may be sharing some prescribed sort of recipe of what they think yoga should be, whereas they're following something their guru or teacher taught them, that guru or teacher, those that I mentioned before, who would say, oh no, what are you doing? You can't tell people that they're practicing yoga by simply taking a moment to breathe in deeply. That's not, no, those people, those kind of teachers, those ones who say it must be this way and no other way, that is the issue. When a student who becomes a yoga teacher follows some prescribed set of movements and breathing patterns and things like that they have to struggle to adopt uh, for their practice, and why it seems so difficult in all these years of mastery is because they're attempting to emulate, to do as their teacher is doing, and do as their teacher does because that's what the teacher said must be done. You must be like me. In order to become yoga master like me, you have to do it like me. However, I'm going to say that that is not the best way for a person to develop their own personal practice and mastery of their own personal practice. nor is it a good way for them to then turn around and teach others this, because they're attempting to fit their square peg in a round hole. This is not the best way to go for that. So, where have we come so far? So far, I spoke about where I found this tagline exposing the conditioned personality from is from a wonderful book called The Heart of Yoga by TKV Desvachar. The book's, from what I remember, the book's main call to action was to develop your own personal practice. And within me developing my own personal practice, I realized that the one thing that was most beneficial for me to do and that I have the most expertise and most dedication to is breathing meditation, which would be called in yoga pranayama yoga, and how you can simply develop your own personal practice of yoga by starting with breathing meditation. And if you want to, you can add more to it there. Now, this does not mean that starting with a breathing practice of yoga should be the only way to go. However, I would add that you think about that more deeply, because without breathing, we are not alive. And from your own experience and that of others, and you may have heard it a lot, that most people aren't breathing as deeply as could be beneficial for them, as could be maximally beneficial for them. And that if you're going to decide to practice yoga, Pilates, calisthenics, resistance training, or any physical exercise, that it is almost ubiquitous or universal that most, if not all, competent instructors, teachers, and people who share things would be telling you that there is a way to breathe, and that the breathing patterns and that taking deep breaths and breathing in a certain way is going to help your practice, your exercise. So it seems that as we explore yoga and as we explore the physical movements of our body and this practice, that it is actually fundamental to start with the breathing practice. So, and since it is a fact that we all must breathe, then if we simply take our thoughts and our focus to our breathing at any point in time and dedicate our energy to taking at least one long deep breath to as many as we can sustain in the time that we have or that feels good for us, we are practicing yoga. A label could be put on that and call it pranayama yoga. And that would be it. You have a yoga practice there. If you did that once a day, you have a consistent yoga practice. If you decided that you were going to add things to that, you don't have to practice the asanas. There's another one of those scary foreign words to many people, right? Those poses. You don't have to practice or do any of the what would be called traditional yoga poses in order to be practicing yoga. You could be practicing yoga while you are boxing. You could be practicing yoga while you are cycling. You could be practicing yoga while you are swimming, while you are walking, while you are lifting weights, resistance training, while you are climbing a tree, while you are eating a piece of fruit or drinking a glass of water. It all comes down to taking your focus and concentration and being mindful of taking in a nourishing breath and releasing it and letting that be that. You have a yoga practice there. If you want to formalize it and say that you are a yoga practitioner, you can say that. You may not necessarily be a yoga teacher, but if you practice deep breathing and you dedicate yourself to doing that every day, you are a practitioner, a dedicated practitioner of yoga, as long as you're being honest with yourself and you're being consistent. There again is as simple as it is to demystify some of the troubling complications that have become barriers to entry for people practicing yoga. It does not have to be tedious, complicated, superfluous, twisty, bendy. No, none of that is necessary. Nor do you have to breathe in for 4 seconds and hold it for 1 and then breathe out for 3 or any of these things. You can make up your own patterns. And how do you make up your own patterns? How do you develop your personal practice? By doing the by taking the tempos, you can call that tempo, the breathing tempo, if you want to. You can count in breathing for 2 and hold for 1 and breathe out for 4, whatever it is. Those tempos that you use are personal, the ones that feel good to you. And as your practice progresses, they may change. You may be taking longer breaths in, so it may go from 2 to 3 to 4. You may start holding it for 2 if you want to, and you might start exhaling it for anywhere starting at 3 to 6 or however long it goes. But you start with what feels good to you. It could be 1-1-1. You could practice with breathing really fast, almost to the point of an induced hyperventilation. Being very careful with that. You can practice holding your breath. Holding your breath is still a practice of breathing meditation as long as you're doing it intentionally. Many of us breathe very shallow without thinking about it. Some of us hold our breaths without thinking about it. It's one of the reasons why we have such stress and we're inflexible and all these different things, digestion, poor sleep, and so on. That happens because we're not breathing in and out deeply enough and fully. But when you simply take your attention to that and you make a consistent practice of nourishing your body with more full and deep breaths, you're practicing yoga and do it consistently. And this part here of exposing the conditioned personality is manifold. First, you expose the conditioning that you may have had of taking short breaths or holding your breaths under times of stress instead of deepening them and moving the flow. So expose that. Bring that to your consciousness. Bring it into the light and address it by taking a deep breath. If you're thinking about it right now, if you think, yeah, sometimes I do that. Sometimes I hold my breath when I get stressed out or startled or angry or whatever. If you're thinking about a time like that right now and it's actually triggering you or making you stressed out, breathe in and out now. Take a deep breath in and breathe it out. It could be out of your nose, out of your mouth, whatever feels good for you. And you've taken the first step in doing a little bit of a yoga practice. Again, if you want to give it a name, you can start to say that you're a pranayama yoga practitioner. Technically, I could say that. I've been doing it for 20 years, and I'm still learning. Dr. Rao, who's on the platform here, and as me being a person who takes deep breaths in and out and controls them and focuses them and uses them whenever I need them to de-stress or to energize myself during my practice of kickboxing, swimming, or any of these other things. Dr. Rao just spoke about something that he does before he gets up in the morning, where he takes at least 10 long deep breaths in the morning. And by him saying that and suggesting that, I started incorporating that into my practice. And so that I know that I don't have to wait until I go into a yoga class or go into a kickboxing session or until something happens or until I think about it to be a practitioner. If I've automatically made it more consistent. Can you believe that? 20 years go by, and now that's the first thing I do in the morning when I do not recall a time that I'd ever done that before. But now I've solidified and made an even more dedicated practice of it. I do it first thing in the morning, and now it reminds me throughout the day. But it's so amazing because I clear it out. I accomplish something first thing in the morning. I accomplish a dedicated practice of a breathing meditation, a pranayama yoga session in the morning, 10 deep breaths. And of course, some of you may have heard before that I then flow into meditating upon my SMART goals. SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound, that I learned and was reminded of by Coach Chelsea D, who's also here on this Zoom by platform, as well as Dr. Rao that I mentioned earlier. And so these that let's go back to what I just said. The first exposing of the conditioning is if you have this conditioning where you tighten up and your breath is short, you hold your breath, right? Expose that. If that's you, expose it and breathe into it and breathe it out. The other exposing that I did here was expose the fact that yoga does not have to be some convoluted, complicated, hyper involved practice that requires you to jump through hoops and have gurus and follow masters to do. You can simply practice breathing meditation as a yoga, a union of your mind, your thinking with your body, your breathing, yoke, right? The union, the yoga, by simply taking your concentration to doing that. And now you can develop your personal practice based on that. Now, finally, moving on from there, I did touch upon briefly, but did not get into any specifics about how you could then take that pranayama yoga practice and turn it into a more involved yoga practice, a physical practice. Now, I did say you don't have to practice the asanas or poses of traditional yoga. However, you can. The difference is that as you're doing the movements, you are controlling your breath to have your body move with the breath. So I'll give a very brief instruction on that and allow you to understand how simple this can be. There are several aspects of our physical being that we do not normally consciously control, but that we can. One of those, actually, is our breathing. Another one of those is the blinking of our eyes. Another one of those that many people don't realize that they can actually change the pace of to a certain extent is the beating of your heart. But let's just stick right now to this breathing and the blinking or the opening and shutting of your eyes. The very basic form of yoga that you can practice, extending this to your physical body, goes like this. You can start with your eyes closed and breathe out. Then, as you breathe in, you open your eyes slowly. And as you breathe out, you slowly shut your eyes. And you can time it in such a way that as you're opening your eyes, by the time you feel that your breath is fully in, your eyes are fully open. And as you exhale, you slowly close your eyes. And so that when your breath is completely out, your eyes are completely shut. You can do that again, opening your eyes with a breath in and closing your eyes with a breath out. Now, what you've done is you've taken two physical things and linked them together, a movement of your eyelids and the movement of your breath. Now, we can continue to extend this to make it more complicated if you want. We can continue. We can say, for example, now if you're sitting down, standing up, whatever, you allow your chin to fall closer to your chest. Your head is bowing down like you're looking towards the floor. You breathe out and you close your eyes. Then as you breathe in, you lift your head so that you're looking forward as your eyes open. And as you breathe out, you bow your head slowly back down and close your eyes. And if your eyes were open, they would be looking towards the floor. Breathe in, open your eyes, lift your head, breathe out, let your head droop, your eyes closed. That's a physical practice. You could extend this further. Now do you see what's happening here? And one of the interesting things to keep in mind to stay safe is that when you do this, you move slowly. Everything that you start new, you should always move through the movements very, very slowly at first. Maybe that's something I could have prescribed before, but here it is now. So another way you can do this, you can do these things together or in isolation. Another way you can do this is start with your hands down at your side. And as you breathe in, you start bringing your hands out to the side and then over your head. And as you breathe out, they will come back down to your side. And again, you can do that by itself, or you can do it with the head drooping and lifting. You can do it with the eyelids closing and opening. You can put all three of those together, or you can match two of them at a time. See how simple this is? You can forget all of those if you want to. You can start from a seated position, your hands on your knees, your feet flat on the floor, and get yourself in a ready position. And you can, as you start to breathe in, you can stand up from where you were sitting. And as you breathe out, you sit back down slowly. No rushing. Here is the yoga practice. You're simply connecting movements to your breathing. And guess what? All of these different things that you do, bowing and lifting your head, shutting and opening your eyes, lifting and lowering your arms, standing up and sitting down, connected with your breath. Guess what? These are all poses, those mysterious asanas. That's all. That's it. You see, you can build your yoga practice from movements that you do daily and even connect it to movements that you want to improve. Let's just say you're not able to squat down fully to the floor or get up from a certain low position. Well, you link your breath to it and you start to slowly practice how you can do that, or practice doing as many of them as you can. You know, if you are not able to squat all the way down to the floor, for example, but that's something that you want to do, so you take a deep breath in while you're fully standing, and as you slowly start to squat down, you slowly start to breathe out, and when you reach the limit of as low as you can go, or maybe a little above that, right, then you breathe in and you stand up again, slowly taking your time, not to rest or anything. You're not dropping down to the floor. We're not trying to crack and tear and break things. And you're not shooting up because we don't want to change our blood pressure and everything too fast, especially with breathing. But again, this is as simple as it can be. And so this can conclude for now our understanding of how simple a practice of yoga can actually be. You take all of this conditioning and you expose it, not because any of it is necessarily good or bad. You determine that after you expose it, right? If you hear a noise in a dark room, you don't automatically need to assume that it's something scary. Turn on the light, expose it to the light, then you can see. That is an oversimplification because, of course, if you know there's no noise supposed to be going on in a dark room, you should get the heck out of there. But do you understand what I'm saying, right? You don't know yet whether you expose something to the light, because we're talking about yoga here, not scary stuff like that. You know that until you expose something to your conscious mind and apply some type of analysis and inspection to it, then you can't fully be certain whether or not it is something good or bad. You can only determine that once you examine it. So we went over some of those things that might not be beneficial, that you may need to expose some conditioning, which could be if when you get stressed or startled or angry that you hold your breath, or you just take really shallow breaths. And I can explain further what shallow means in by yogis and other breathing practitioners. It means that you're only breathing in the upper part of your chest and not allowing your abdomen to relax and expand like a little baby's belly does when they breathe in. Their bellies rise and fill because it allows your diaphragm, which is this little piece of tissue that's right at the bottom of uh, your sternum area, right, the solar plexus, that like that triangle pointy shape that goes up into the middle of your chest before the hard bone plate gets there, right? When you breathe in, that should be falling down, and of course, when it falls down, it's because it's letting in air. Air has volume; it has physical mass, and so that's pushing things around inside your body. And so, it's better if you allow your belly to expand so that the air can fully get in. That's what. But if you're not doing that, if you're just breathing in your chest in the upper part, that's what is considered to be shallow as far as this terminology goes. Now, of course, because I operate a lot by free association, something else came into my mind that's related to that. And that should be intuitive to many of us. We know this because we can feel it. But now you can see how this applies to a larger physical perspective of practicing yoga, your personal practice, starting with the breathing practice, the so called pranayama. And you may notice that it may be for many people easier and feel less obstructed to breathe out when you bend over or lean forward, because what's happening is you're compressing and crunching up that stuff in your abdomen, right? So when you're doing that, naturally everything's pushing on your diaphragm and everything's getting smaller. The space is getting smaller there. So it feels better to breathe out when you bend over. Like if you're a person who's able to touch your toes, or any level between standing up and touching your toes, the further you get down, you bring the upper part of your body down towards the ground, there's going to be less space in your abdominal area and that lower part of your torso. And so all of that scrunching up and stuff pushing together is going to want to make you breathe out because it's easier. It's not as if the space is becoming more tight. And so this is one of the first ways that I began practicing this, and one of the reasons why a lot of people gravitated towards my classes, because I did things that were very physically responsive and intuitive that just felt better. I wasn't having people crunch in upon themselves and force them to take breaths in while their body was folded over itself, because that didn't feel good to me. Remember, I'm sharing my personal practice. And so in doing this, and also in doing simple things like showing people that they can raise their arms over their head slowly and breathe in, and as they lower their arms, breathe out, it shows how simple you can make these connections. And then you start doing these different kinds of lunges, like the warrior ones and warrior twos and all this other stuff that we build into it. But everyone starts where they are. But let me not get ahead of all of this and keep it simple. So this is where we land this now, because we've got enough information here to think about very fully and very deeply. And it's that we need to expose the fact that many of us may not be breathing deeply, and also that yoga is not a complicated thing, and that when we simply begin to focus on breathing more deeply, and then automatically we are practicing yoga, and then we can start to add different physical movements to that and build our own catalog of asanas or poses and build your own personal practice from there. And by doing that, you can build a huge, complicated practice of yoga that is based on movements that you can do. And as you go along, eventually, you know what happens? You have this full catalog of all these things that you're doing, just lifting of your arms to the side and then putting them down while breathing, lifting up to the front and putting them down by breathing, standing up and breathing in and sitting down and breathing out, opening and closing your eyes and breathing, and doing all these things one at a time, sometimes putting them together. And next thing you know, you'll find ways that of which order you want to do them, which order feels good to you, what order starts to help you feel more flexible if that's what you want to do. When do you do things that's going to help you make you feel stronger? You start to build your own practice from there. And that is the essence of what I call my personal brand, right? My personal practice of yoga that's called Dream Action Yoga, exposing the conditioned personality. And that is that line that I resonated with from the book The Heart of Yoga by T.K.V. Desachar, exposing the conditioned personality. And it has become so many things to me because very often we can unpack the entire universe from a single subquantum particle. It's this idea of being a microcosm in a macrocosm. We have everything within us that we could possibly need to create all that we desire. So start where you are. I would suggest it be with breathing and expose the conditioning that you have where you may not be feeling yourself, and then build from there. Dream Action Yoga, exposing the conditioned personality. Thank you for passing by or stopping for a while here. Rebecca L., Kylie, Amy Jacobson, Melissa Caroselli, Stephanie Renee, Nick Manugera, Yanni Copeland. How you doing there? Salem Djembe, Amy Packard, Noble Ron. How the heck have you been? Ronald Snyder, Dar with the dashes. Lydia Vasochenko, Kaylee Levacy Sabin, Dawn Boffman, excuse me, Teresa Chase, Peace 101, Carol Wagner, Sandra Brooks, Derek Rudolph, Tony Rodriguez, Brian Oakley, George Russell, Davina, Genevieve Smith, Shanna Gray, and Himani. Welcome, and until next time, stay well.